Welcome to this explainer. Okay, if you've ever wondered just how utterly chaotic the tech world can get behind closed doors, well, you're in for an absolute treat today. We're going to break down the brilliantly sharp satire of the tech industry that we see in the high-stakes, just incredibly turbulent fourth season of Silicon Valley. I mean, this season, it's a literal masterclass in watching brilliant people make terrible, hilarious decisions. We're going to unpack the massive pivots, the corporate sabotage, and the literal explosions that make this whole season so memorable. So get comfortable, because we've got a lot of ground to cover. Okay, let's dive right into our agenda. Think of this as our Q4 strategy deck for today. First up, we're tackling the Piper Chat disaster. Next, we'll look at the decentralized internet. Then we're exploring the chaos at Hooli. And finally, we'll wrap up with reception and reviews. Sound good? Let's get right to it.
All right, part 1, the Piper Chat disaster.
So, the season starts with a total bang. The Pied Piper team officially pivots away from their old compression platform and shifts all their focus to Dinesh's surprisingly successful video chat app. But here's the million-dollar, or rather billion-dollar question. How do you actually escape a massive legal disaster? Because right as Piper Chat takes off and starts grabbing serious investor attention, Richard discovers a fatal, basically company-ending flaw in their data repository. I mean, it's a flaw so big, it literally threatens to wipe them off the map completely.
And that fatal flaw? It all comes down to COPPA. That's the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. It's an absolutely crucial, super strict law designed to protect the safety of minors online. Well, Richard starts digging and discovers that a staggering 1/3 of Piper Chat's entire user base is made up of kids. And their terms of service? Yeah, they completely failed to require parental permission. So in the eyes of the law, they are illegally collecting data on minors on a massive, massive scale.
And this right here brilliantly illustrates the astronomical stakes of the tech industry. $21 billion. Let that sink in. That is the staggering, completely unimaginable penalty hanging over the team's heads for these COPPA violations. They are absolutely dead in the water. But how do they escape? Well, in a stroke of sheer, desperate genius, Dinesh manages to trick their massive corporate rival, Hooli, led by Gavin Belson, into acquiring Piper Chat. Belson is just so blinded by his obsession with crushing them that he demands they sign over the company immediately. He completely skips the standard legal due diligence. By the time Hooli realizes what they've actually bought, that $21 billion target is entirely on their back. It is just a spectacular bait and switch.
Which brings us to part 2, the decentralized internet.
So, Richard Hendricks flat out refuses to be the CEO of a video chat app he doesn't truly believe in. He steps down to build something wild, a revolutionary new internet based entirely on the network power of everyday smartphones, completely bypassing those massive corporate mainframes. But, while Richard is dreaming of global infrastructure, let's look at what the rest of the incubator is up to. Jian Yang's app development journey is, well, it's perhaps the greatest example of failing up in tech history. He starts out pitching this Oculus VR concept, right, which turns out to actually be an app for octopus recipes. Then he gets some funding and it morphs into Seafood, which is literally just an app that can only tell you if an image is a hot dog or not. Finally, after a very frustrated Erlich snaps an inappropriate picture, Jian Yang pivots the app one last time into a filter for illicit anatomical photos. And guess what? It gets acquired by the real-world company Periscope. It's such a hilarious contrast. Richard is out here trying to save the world, while Jian Yang gets rich off a hot dog detector.
But bringing it back to Richard's grand vision for a second, building a new internet is an absolute nightmare of bad luck and terrible choices. Let's look at the obstacles. First up, Richard discovers Gavin Belson actually patented the decentralized internet idea years ago. The outcome? Richard is forced into this incredibly uneasy alliance with his sworn enemy, who eventually just bails on him anyway. Okay, next up, to fund the project, Richard targets the FGI cloud deal. But in just a catastrophic lapse in judgment, he accidentally sleeps with the FGI CTO's new fiancée, completely torching that relationship. No coming back from that one. Finally, they try to get acquired by the up-and-coming VR whiz Keenan Feldspar. But nope, they get outbid at the absolute last second by Hooli, who buys Feldspar's completely bloated, overhyped VR demo instead. It is literally just roadblock after roadblock.
So, how in the world does this possibly work out? Let's walk through this absolutely incredible sequence of events from the season finale. Step 1. Anton, the team's massive humming homemade server, loses power because, well, they can't pay the incubator's electricity bills. Step 2. In a desperate last-ditch scramble to move Anton over to Stanford, the server components literally fall out of the back of their moving truck, physically destroying all their hardware. It's over, right? But then, step 3, the miracle. They realize their network is actually still running. Why? Because Guilfoyle had previously used Pied Piper's code to hack Jian Yang's annoying smart fridge, and that code autonomously spread from fridge to fridge all across the Bay Area. Which brings us to step 4. The decentralized network is fundamentally proven to work, all thanks to a rogue network of smart kitchen appliances. It is the ultimate startup victory, snatched straight from the jaws of absolute disaster.
All right, let's move on to part 3, chaos at Hooli.
Now, you might think a multi-billion-dollar tech conglomerate would be a totally well-oiled machine compared to a scrappy little startup, but trust me, the corporate giants are honestly just as dysfunctional. Just follow this wild sequence of corporate musical chairs. Day 1. Because of that PiperChat Kappa disaster we just talked about, Gavin Belson is completely ousted as CEO. Day 2, he's instantly replaced by his arch-rival, Jack Barker. Day 3, Barker, who is desperate to manufacture a new hardware box, flies out to a factory in China and pushes the workers so hard they literally take him hostage. I mean, you literally cannot make this up. And Day 4, who swoops in to save the day? Gavin Belson. He flies to China, negotiates Barker's release, regains the board's trust, and takes his CEO job right back. It is this dizzying, exhausting loop of power and ego that achieves absolutely nothing but pure chaos. And that chaos at Hooli, it peaks in a very literal, very destructive way at their annual tech conference, HooliCon. See, Pied Piper desperately needed user installs for their new network, so they secretly hijacked the phones of HooliCon attendees by disguising their app as a free Wi-Fi download. Sneaky, right? Well, the collateral damage was intense. When Jack Barker and Keenan Feldspar tried to run their massive keynote mobile demo for Hooli VR, the immense processing strain caused 50 attendees' smartphones to overheat and physically explode right there in the auditorium. It's just a hilarious, completely catastrophic collision of Pied Piper's guerrilla tactics and Hooli's insanely bloated technology.
Finally, part 4, reception and reviews. So how did the real-world critics respond to all this constant failure, endless pivoting, and, literal explosions? They absolutely loved it. Despite the incredibly chaotic plot lines and the constant resetting of the characters' fortunes, the season was a massive critical success. It pulled in an ultra-impressive 94% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Critics consistently noted that this veteran comedy somehow managed to add enough new wrinkles to stay incredibly fresh. In fact, Vern Gay over at Newsday perfectly captured the consensus. He wrote, "There's a sense that we've traveled down this road paved with silicon once or twice before, but the ride is still smart, engaging, and highly informative." And honestly, it's so true. Reviewers definitely recognize the show's pattern. You know the drill. The characters constantly find a bit of success, they immediately ruin it through self-sabotage or just horrible luck, and then they find themselves totally resetting at the end of the season. But the writing is just so sharp, and the satire is so incredibly on point that it simply doesn't matter. You are completely engaged the entire time. Which kind of leaves us with this final thought. Some critics definitely complained about the repetitive nature of the show, that constant loop of building something up just to burn it right back down. But I want you to ask yourself, is this repetitive loop of success and failure actually the most realistic depiction of the tech industry possible? I mean, think about it. In a real-world Silicon Valley that is completely defined by constant pivoting, incredibly volatile investments, and massive, massive egos, maybe a clean, linear journey to success would actually be the real fiction. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope breaking it down like this helped clarify just how deep this satire really goes here. Keep questioning.